Thanks for coming. It is 3:30, and I will call the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority to order, and we are going to start with public comments. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. After receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment? Mr. Miles.
My name is Richard Miles. Today I'll be speaking Mr. Hanson, are you aware that sometimes language, especially in the law, has different meanings, such as the word shall and the word may? Okay. I would hope that you would ask the county's attorney, the solid waste attorney, and I hope Catherine Murray would ask the city attorney to review a certain code. Because last night, a decision couldn't be made about appointing 2 people who volunteered to be on the solid waste task force. Section, I'm going to quote the section. It's 40950. It's a statute that forms the membership and duties of the solid waste task force. And if it's my understanding, you are the one that suggested that the city have an opportunity to choose a members to this body. Because of that reason, I want to read this to you, because the word shall is a stronger language than may. It says, on or before March 1, 1990, and every 5 years thereafter, each county, which is not a city or county, shall. Now, shall is a pretty strong word. It's not a dirty word, but it has a lot of meaning in the law. Shall convene a task force to assist in coordinating the development of a city source reduction and recycling element. There's a code that's cited. And county source reduction and recycling pursuant another chapter of the law. Now, this is what I think is interesting, because there's nothing in there that says how many people can serve on the task force. I think more the merrier. You get more public opinion. But this is what kind of disturbs me, because I honestly believe that in the past, how the task force was formed with certain memberships are really not serving the public interest.
Thank you, Richard. Is there any other public comment?
I'd like to give you this, Mr. Hemmington. It's
sure.
interesting reading.
Thanks. Mr. Dillard.
Thank you. Now is when you're supposed to start it, after he recognizes it. Anyway, the county's ad hoc committee on solid waste has since taken on a different historical perspective and what appears to be an intentional misconstrued final results. And that's this report here that all of us did. The ad hoc committee was formed in 2/17/09, immediately what was initially viewed as a good process of government reviewing itself was derailed when the county had not had any prior discussion with the city, and the city felt blindsided as a partner of the JPA. Efforts to rectify this by asking the city to equally participate in the process was met with a refusal by the mayor, then Slong. The ad hoc committee's report was submitted on 4/11/11, and there intentionally were not any recommendations as to a final determination of the Waste Management Authority. Issues were reviewed, were stated on page 8 under the topic New Steps, last sentence clearly states, any future changes should be discussed by all parties jointly or in their respective public forum. How this can now be interpreted by election campaigning as a final determination of no change is pure political spin, lack of having personally read it, or an intentional misrepresentation of the fact. Political correctness regarding the JPA dictated that no recommendation of this type be made due to the lack of city involvement or input. This does not mean the ad hoc committee did not feel that the issue should not be pursued. In addition to the county representation, 4 independent citizens participated in the ad hoc committee. 3 of the 4 clearly indicated that in their separate reports, that there are issues that warrant additional review and possible restructuring of the JPA should be explored, but not without input of the city. No member wanted to undo any positive accomplishments, but questioned bureaucratic efficiency remaining and needed to be explored by the city and county for introspection. I now ask that you set the record straight for the citizens of this county regarding the recommendations by the ad hoc committee. Also, it would be nice if we stopped playing politics with this issue. Unfortunately, it now appears that we've become the mirror image of Washington, D.C. election politics. The ad hoc committee was formed on 2/17, report submitted on 4/11/11. It's been over a year, and there's little accomplished for the government efficiency. You've neutralized the arbitrary and capricious operation of a 5-member waste management board, but you have not done anything to restructure the entity or determine why the authority is $2 million in debt. In any event, all the elections for county and city positions will be over in November. What's another 6 months delay for the taxpayers? They're kind of used to it. Or possibly you can take a positive action and do something to restructure the entity.
Thank you, Paul.
I'm just trying to get you back on target. And I'd like a clarification on there was no recommendation.
Thank you, Paul. Is there any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City, and I'm before you tonight as a totally satisfied customer of your residential trash removal service and recycling service that you all provide through Recology, and for the friendly and broad spectrum disposal opportunities that you provide at the transfer station through Hambro. We've needed it for a long time. We like it in our neighborhood, and we hope that no decisions that you make, as I've said many times before, will affect that on-the-street service. The second is to pay some tribute to the members of the board here who are up for re-election. You guys are in the arena. You have to make or consider the hard decisions. Your opponents are free to take pot shots from left and right field however they want to. But I admire your courage in doing what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. Any other public comment?
Hello, Jerry. It's Laith Killam here on behalf of the union. I don't know if you want me to address this during public comment. I was told by Andrea Wadsworth that the board asked for input from the union on the question of privatization at the meeting. So I made a trip.
Yeah, I think we're going to have some discussion later, but why don't you go ahead?
All right.
Because I don't think we're going to get into much of that today, so go ahead, Leif.
Okay, I'll keep it short and sweet. Our review of the statutes indicates that the county and the city cannot contract out their responsibility for oversight over the landfill. There's no practicable way to hold a private entity accountable. So in the end, the public entities collectively will be holding the bag if there's any problems. Both of the enforcement order from the Regional Water Quality Board and from Cal Recycle are specifically about the landfill. The issue of collection is a different one in the sense of how that can be handled. It's our view that the services that are being provided at the gate are valuable and appreciated by the community, are offered at a lower cost than any of our nearby competitor jurisdictions. We know that there are budgetary and cost issues at the agency. It is our position that those are within the management capability of the board to get control over. If you have concerns with your at-will employees, you're fully capable of addressing those. We believe that our gate workers are providing services at a very competitive price, and they have good rapport with the public. We do have some things that we'd like to see improved in the contract, but we'll save that for another day. With that said, we also believe that the environmental perspective that is offered by all of the staff is an important one for the future of our region. We all have to drink the water. We know that the volatile organic compounds that are leaching gradually out of the landfill are carcinogenic, they are dangerous, and we know that the landfill is classified as a 1A. So we would urge caution in any consideration of putting that responsibility in private hands, because you'll still be stuck with it.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello, I'm Victoria Dickey from the county. I went to the city council meeting last night. My understanding is that there were 2 openings on the solid waste task force. There were 2 people who applied for those openings, and they were at the city last night. While I was there, the question came up whether there were really 2 or 3 openings. The other question became whether or not, because no one from the city had applied, that maybe they should appoint someone from city staff. Also, they were unclear as to what it was they were to do. They instructed their attorney to look into various things and get back to them. The conclusion is that they did not deal with the 2 applicants who had come, and the applicants had been requested to come. So I don't think that the city, after hearing that they weren't even involved when they were asked initially to join in on whatever the prior reports were, it doesn't seem to me like they're doing anything except dragging their feet. Therefore, what I'm requesting is that if you would make sure that they do their job, if they don't work on the recommendations, work on the applications that have been submitted, that you set forth a procedure that you will follow to get those applications either approved or denied. I have time left. Yay.
Oh, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, then I'm going to close the public comment period, and we are going to move on to a report from the Solid Waste Task Force. Nothing? Okay. Okay, so we'll hold that off then. So I think she tried to call me earlier. I was in the meeting. Let's move on to item number 2, the consent agenda, which includes only the minutes of Tuesday, April 24th.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment on the consent agenda only? Seeing no public comment, then bring it back to the commission. Any comments, questions, additions, corrections? Okay. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Westphal? Yes. Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Chair Hamilton?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamara?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Thank you. Passed.
Okay, we are going to move on to the director's report. Kevin?
The director's report includes attachments, claims approved by the director, section 5 reports, revenue comparisons for the last 2 years, and March treasury control report. Sorry, microphone.
Yeah, much better.
Technology. Included with the director's report is the March 2012 treasurer controller report, and on the Friday that I was delivering the agendas to you, I also got the April report, which I'd be happy to give to you if you'd like to have that for information. Otherwise, I'll publish it at the next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting is fine. I won't go through that right now.
In addition to the financial reports, for your information, we included a compliance report that we're required to do now that we're taking debit and credit cards. It's mainly looking at our security issues and our technology. I want to thank Ted and Sean Slater for preparing that. It was quite a complicated thing. And then 3.6, the last item on the director's report, is I think a well-written final report on all the things that were accomplished with the household hazardous waste grant that just wrapped up. And probably most important to note is that the financial reimbursement request included with that has $100,851 coming back to us, so that'll bring all the money that we've put out back to us, and clearly will help our cash flow as we head to the end of the year. So that financial reimbursement request has been approved. It turned around pretty quickly because it was a very thorough, well-documented. I didn't include all the backup and all the documents, the financial documents for you, but the program report is there. In any case, the $100,000 has been approved, and I expect the state will hold on to the money as long as they possibly can before they give it to us, but we'll get it, and we'll count it for this fiscal year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from commissioners?
Yes, I have some questions, Kevin. On the Marsh Legal Services for $3,000.
Can you say which section you're on and
Claim
turn your
director sheet 3.1.
Can you turn your mic on?
It's on.
It's
Oh.
on.
can't hear?
Section 3.1.
Yeah. On 4/9/2012, Robert Black, $3,000 March Legal Services. I'd just like to know why that's so high. Or if I could get a breakout so that we see what he's charging for.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you a copy of that invoice.
Okay, I appreciate that. On
Sure.
the triplicate for $29,000, $2,900 March Sharp ads, what kind of circulation does a triplicate currently have?
Thank you,
Okay.
Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that'll
The-
take care of my two questions.
The reporter in the room said 6,000, in case they didn't pick up on the mic.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, just
Mr. Hull?
one relatively minor one, I think. On section, it's my section 3 under Authority Revenue Report. We have authority unpaid charges of $56,882. I was trying to tie that back to some of the outstanding debt that we have and everything. I couldn't tie it back.
Yeah.
Tell me how that works?
It's the first time I've added this because as we're getting toward the end of the year, that that number has gotten larger, and it's I think relevant for you to know. What I did was I added up there's two in the section 3.2. You have a list of all the charge accounts that are outstanding, and in that report, embedded in that report, is a line that says KTS, GTS, it's Gasky and Klamath Transfer Station. Those are charges from us to us, because it's actually the disposal from the Klamath Transfer Station and the Gasky Transfer Station. So those, when the garbage company pulls those dumpsters over the scale, it gets charged as a regular customer, but because we're charging it to ourselves, we don't actually pay that. So over the period of the year, that adds up to about $60,000 in disposal charges that actually aren't revenue coming to us. Now, because we pay Hambro about 2/3 of that, $60,000, our out-of-pocket cost on that is about $40,000. But I subtracted the total amount because it's subtracting it off the total charge. The reports that we give you is, I mean, it's sort of mixing apples and oranges, because you have the auditor's report, which is whatever they've received as of that point. The monthly charge and cash reports is the actual report of business we've done during that month, which means we have booked that revenue, but we haven't gained it. We haven't actually received it yet, because you can see on the charge accounts, we've got over 200,000 every month. We've got a carryover of charge accounts. So I just want to make the point that out of all those charges due, some portion of that is our charge to ourselves, and we're deadbeats, and we never pay ourselves. But that does account for that, that money.
Thank you. Appreciate that explanation. Commissioner Shalom.
I was just going to ask, why don't you, rather than let it accumulate, write it off, not write it off, but balance it out on a monthly or quarterly basis?
We can look at doing that. I'm not sure. I'd have to probably work with Clint to figure out how to do that, because it's a reflection of the charges that have come in. It is a reflection of all the waste that has come in.
But you're saying you write it all off at the end of the year?
And
I don't mean write it off.
Yeah,
I mean,
we absorb that cost.
Right.
And the difference, the way that I've recognized that expense in the coming year is if you look at the coming year's budget, I created a difference between the amount of money coming in to pay Hambro and the amount of money that we pay Hambro. And the difference now is that $40,000, because there's that chunk of money where we pay them, but we don't actually have a revenue stream to pay them. So we're starting to recognize that more formally in our budget as well.
We don't have a revenue stream? We don't get a revenue stream?
Well, we do get the revenue from Gasky and Klamath, and that helps to pay for it, but that's all embedded in the total revenue that comes in. It doesn't show up as a payment to the charge accounts.
Maybe it should.
We can see if there's a way to do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there is.
Okay.
I mean, you got revenues and expenses. Seems like you should be able to put that together fairly easily. I don't know. I mean, I have to come out in whatever the report
well,
you do.
The monthly charge and cash reports always line out separately the revenue that comes from Gasky and Klamath. So the revenue is reflected in the reports that you get.
But the expenditure is not reflected?
Well, not in the revenue report. The revenue is.
But I mean,
it accumulates as a
but it would, as a fee
debt
that we pay to Hambros, and that fee is reflected in our expenditures.
Yes, the amount that we pay to Hambro includes that amount. Yes.
So why doesn't that just happen? I mean, why is it that we're making a special place for the revenue, and then you're breaking this out on our costs, and why isn't that already Why isn't that already there? If you're showing it on your, if you're showing it on your monthly reports, why isn't that already put in? If you're showing it as your revenue and your expenditure on
Well,
your,
the monthly report for the cash and charge reports just shows the revenue side of that. And the expense is part of that charge report.
Okay.
So I'm trying to correlate this information
Right.
so it's as useful as possible for you,
Yep.
and I'll
okay, well, I appreciate you breaking that out because I was not aware that there was, that fee was there. I'll have to take a look at that. So I didn't understand what that was, and I appreciate Mr. Hawley bringing that up.
and we'll see if we can find a way to describe it more clearly for you.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Any questions or comments from the public? Or I should say, comments from the public. It's not a question and answer time. Yes, Mr. Miles.
Well, maybe I'm a little confused, and I have a question. Currently, we have 2 locations in this county where self-haulers take their garbage to, and we have people there that's supposed to be collecting revenue when those people take their garbage there as self-haulers to save them the expense of coming into town and using the transfer station, if I understand the rationale for having a transfer station in Klamath and in Gasky. The question I'd like to ask, because I don't think it was asked by any member of the authority, except I think Kelly was barking up the tree, is the revenue from those transfer stations down such that they don't cover the cost of Mr. Sparrow actually getting the big containers and bringing them into town?
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we're going to move on to item number 4.1. I guess we got some repairs to do. Kevin, Ted?
Yep. Ted has some pictures for you.
Okay, yeah. Oops. There we are. Okay. So this is just to inform you all of some of the regular maintenance activities we do out at the landfill, in addition to working with Alder Camp and trimming the vegetation so that essentially it'll be easier for raptors to eat moles and voles and other burrowing creatures to reduce the erosion issues. After the winter rains, of course, we look through and see what repairs are needed. And so we have 4 main repair areas that need attention at the landfill. I was just out there today with Jeff Daniels from the road department talking about different strategies to fix these. The first one, if you look at the area 1 there, it points right here. And so that's what repair area 1 looks like. That's a 10-foot stick that I'm holding. So it's eroded off the side of the road. The rock that is protecting the outside of the landfill has sunk because the sand below it has eroded. Partially this is because as the landfill settles, in that area, the outer portion of the road has settled more than the inner portion of the road, and so now the road slopes slightly outward, and when we have heavy storm flows, then some of that flow goes off the edge of the road and creates the situation you're seeing there. So we'd fill that area with rock to reestablish those grades. Area 2 is the biggest in terms of volume, the amount of material. Again, I'm holding the rod there. There's a picture from looking from up top down below, looking from down below up top. It's a fairly large erosion. Area 3 is a slightly smaller area on the other side of that down drain. And area 4 is among the steepest areas and that's right in what we're calling the armpit area. Like I said, it's a steeper portion of the landfill, and it is essentially up in this area. This drainage berm got filled with enough sand that during the heavy storm flows, it went over the top here and then essentially undermined this berm here, and the flow continued down. So we're planning on doing these repairs. At this point, we have a little over $3,000 remaining in the line from which we would do the repairs, and it might be more expensive than that. We order materials and stockpile them on site. I try not to use any more materials than are necessary. And because over the years, we used to work with contractors, and then I'd be out there trying to direct them. And since I was very aware of where the liners were and what areas of caution there were, eventually I concluded it would be easier for me to just drive the equipment. So that's what we currently do. But because the road department has more experience in these kinds of things, I always try to consult with those who have done more of these kinds of repairs before I actually do the work. So that's the report on the landfill repairs. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Sloan?
Just quickly, trying to remember the outcome of when we asked the harbor if we could use the dredge spoils out at the landfill. Do you remember what the test results were for that?
I've worked with those materials before, and they're pretty problematic for our functions there, and it has to do with the harbor dredge generally has a lot of organic matter in it, and it has a lot of sand. Mm-hmm. And so both of those materials individually might be fine, but the problem is with those two materials together, if that harbor dredge becomes saturated and then you try to work it with equipment, you squeeze all the water out of the organic material and then it flows. So that's a problem.
Would you like some sludge?
Well, actually, on that note, one of the things that did come from the conversation with Jeff Daniels is the county has been storing their ditch cleaning materials, and over the last couple of years, they've done a much better job of trying to make sure that there's no trash in there. And so I have high hopes that after we scrape off the top layer of vegetation that's growing on top of those ditch cleaning materials, that we'll be able to use those ditch cleaning materials as part of this repair, again, trying to save costs.
Cool. Any other questions from commissioners?
I would just like to make a comment that how much I appreciate how you're willing to try to save costs, and I don't think there's another program manager within 100 miles of here that would say, you know, I'm going to get on the heavy equipment and do it to save money and to make sure that it's done properly. So kudos to you for doing that. Thank you.
I have a quick question about the landfill. I'm assuming it's off limits for the public to go on that property, but I don't know if it would be beneficial to go on a field trip as a member of the Solid Waste Management Authority or not. I mean, I haven't been there since it was an active landfill.
I'd be happy to give a tour to one or however many members of the board would be interested in going out there.
I think that would be instructive for me, at least, and I don't know about the other board.
I think you can make arrangements anytime. I've made arrangements years ago and went out with Kevin. We toured the whole place.
Anytime. Just give the office a call. We'll work it out.
Yeah. That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah.
I did have one question. In picture number 2, it looked like there was a vent pipe there that was leaning a little bit. Is that an issue?
That's not as much of a problem as it might look like, because what those are passive gas vents, and during the construction, they essentially are venting gases that will accumulate beneath the plastic liner, and then they just vent those to the air.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be standing straight up.
Exactly, and in fact, before we accepted the closure construction, we did look down there to make sure that there was integrity on those.
I just happened to see that, and I would just ask the question. Yeah. Any public comment on the landfill closure repair?
You what, sir?
On the landfill closure repair on item number 4.
That thing is going to be a headache forever. Has anybody done any research? Can it be removed? Can it be turned? You can take an oil spill, you can take a chemical dump, you can do a lot of things with it. The way I see this keeping going, this thing will be 50,000 plus every year, plus maintenance, plus, you know, for our future, we're gonna, unless that thing gets turned, and I don't know all that can be done. Has research been done? Can we remove that dump? Can you haul it away? Can I ask that question?
answer to the board.
I mean, to me, we're sitting around here and that dump's gonna be here forever. And we keep saying, okay, well, let's pay the 50 to the state. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing that. And that pile sits there. When you can get rid of an oil spill, you can get rid of a chemical spill, you got an ammonia tank, a train that derails, you can take that soil and do something with it. But to pay 50,000 plus don't make a lot of sense.
Thank you, Andy.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a response?
It's not normally question and answer time, but if you would like to make a response, you may.
Please, thank you. Andy Larson, I think you have brought up a very valid point. I have done some research on waste-to-energy burn gasification facilities. I haven't looked at each facility myself or called them to see the ins and outs of how that would work, okay? But I think that your point is right spot on, and we should be looking seriously at just that issue. So thank you for bringing it up.
Okay. Any other public comment? Mr. Miles.
Years ago, when the discussion of closing the dump come up, I brought in some paperwork one time because I always questioned how we covered the dump after we closed it. I'm aware that certain grasses create certain kind of matting and can cause the soil not to erode like what happens at the dump. We are spending a lot of money to go out there every year and try to remedy erosion problems. I'd like to suggest that maybe we get a hold of the USDA, who have done studies using such grasses of buffalo grass and other grasses to see if we could reseed the dump without harming the rubberized barrier to prevent the costs that we're having to spend every year fixing their erosion problems.
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment on the landfill repair? Do we need to take an action on this, Kevin? You want, we're good?
This is, we wanted to show this to you because this is
Appreciate it.
the worst that we've seen in a few years because of the heavy storms we had.
We've had some strange rains, so not unexpected in this.
And I appreciate Martha's comments about, and will add to my thanks for Ted's willingness to get out there and fix this for a couple $1,000.
Cool. Anything else from commissioners? We're going to move on. Okay. Collections franchise 5.1.
I assume that you noticed that we did one staff report under 5.1 that is related to both contracts, CPI adjustments, and the rate resolution. So I think Ted may provide you a brief overview, and you can ask questions on this or the other actions as they come.
So this staff report covers agenda items 5.1, 6.2, and 7.2, because they're all kind of related in that both our transfer station operations agreement with Hambro Waste WSG and our franchise collections agreement with Recology Del Norte include in there cost controls, meaning that fuel goes up, insurance goes up, all sorts of things make prices go up and things get more expensive. And so we have in these agreements an understanding that when inflation goes up, the consumer price index, which is used to measure inflation, goes up, and then we adjust these contracts based on what's happened with inflation. For the transfer station operations agreement, we adjust it to 80% of what the inflation is, with an understanding that there's a 3% maximum cap, meaning that the transfer station costs won't go up more than 3% each year. And hopefully in coming years, they'll make up that difference with the CPI, but it's really the consumer price index that is used as the basis for these rate changes, so that they're gradual, they're not much per year. But they are embedded in our agreements. So if you want us to do something different, then we'll need very explicit instructions as to how we would go about that. But this is what is currently in our agreements. So looking at, this is a sampling of rates, looking at what will happen under the proposed rate changes. Essentially, the per ton rate at the transfer station is currently $134.14. It would go to $138.16 per ton. And you'll see down the line, there's a 3% increase. The minimum charge will go from what is currently $6.70 to $6.90. Comparing this to rates in the surrounding area, our transfer station is the least expensive of any facility within the region. It's cheaper than what you would be charged in Curry County. It's cheaper than what you would be charged in Humboldt County. And we're anywhere between 6% and 137% cheaper. Looking at the collection rate changes.
Ted, sorry to interrupt you. Is this just residential you're making the comparison, or are you doing with this commercial rates as well?
This comparison is just looking at transfer station, at disposal facilities.
For basically residential?
At disposal facilities.
Okay.
This isn't the collection rate.
No, that's coming.
Got it. Okay.
So looking at the collection rates, this is how the rates would change. You're comparing on the far left, you'll have what the proposed rate would be changed to. Then you'll see the column with 2011, that's what the current rates are. Then you'll see the dollar changes, that's the dollar change per each rate, and the percentage change. The percentage change, you'll notice that the collection contract does not have 3% cap. So it's 3.54%.
So it's purely based on CPI?
It's based on
100% of CPI?
I think it's 85%.
Okay.
Okay? So comparing those residential rates, you'll see that we're about normal. We're not the absolute lowest, but we're also not the highest compared to surrounding areas.
Except that these are going in the wrong direction. When we have constituents that are losing their food budget, can't pay their utilities, can't pay their meds, how do we have the nerve and the conscience to raise rates? Why aren't we decreasing expenses and decreasing rates?
Shall I answer that?
I think that was a question directed at you.
Yeah, this is how our contract currently reads. Our contract for collections, our contracts for transfer station operations, based on changes to CPI.
This isn't, I think it probably should be explained that this isn't a solid waste raise. This is a raise for Recology's contract and for Hambro's contract, not necessarily the fees that the Solid Waste Authority gains. Are we also raising our portion?
It's a raise for all three.
5.1 is the CPI for the collection rates, so that's just recology. The item 6.2 is a CPI adjustment on the transfer station rates, and on the transfer station rates that does increase the total tipping fee, which means that about a third of that increase comes to us and about 2/3 goes to Hambro. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And are we seeing that need? I mean, I understand that the request has been made by Recology. They're seeing the need, whether that's because of fuel prices, I'm assuming. I don't know what else it would be. And we're seeing that same thing from Hambro Waste Management or whatever they are, because they use a lot of fuel also. But is there a need for us to also be included in that?
Well, let me answer that two different ways. For the CPI increases for Hambro and Recology, that is part of their contract, so we have already committed to do that for them. You have discretion on the transfer station rates if you don't want to include it, to include a revenue increase for us. But if you, when we talk about the budget and when you talk about having a sustainable source of revenue and the fact that garbage is going down anywhere from 2 to 4%, the 3% rate increase for us helps us keep pace with our expenses. I mean, this is a dynamic that you'll have to wrestle with, I think, is...
Actually, I think at the last meeting we phrased the question for staff to come up with a sustainability model. Increasing rates is not the answer. I mean, that's the only answer I've seen so far given is for solid waste to remain sustainable is you have to increase your fees. And I still see in the budget under 6.1 that we're still guessing at the amount of waste coming across the system at 1.8 million. We're not hitting that this year. And this year, even with the tsunami built in there, we're still going to be on estimates 1.48. I don't know why we keep projecting out there. I think you're 40,000 under this year, and you're still not going to hit that in terms of what you're estimating for this fiscal year coming up. So I don't know where these figures come from, but they're not realistic figures. That's not what's occurring right now or has occurred in the last 3 years. And that's where we run into trouble is we're projecting stuff that doesn't materialize. And we make money off of what goes to the transfer side. So I guess that's the confusion I have on that is why we keep, and I've heard the figure come out that we try to do a rosy picture on our budget, but that's not accurate and that's not realistic.
I don't think I said that. If you want to look at the revenue, the item 3.3 is a pretty clear reflection of the revenue that's coming in this year. The revenue that's coming in our end of it is
But that's because your fees jacked up earlier this year. That's the only reason. That and the tsunami. You stretch out those two things, you strip those out, then you're down.
Well, we gave you the numbers and the graphs in color that you asked for, and our analysis of that is that there will be a reduction in the disposal this year. That's factored in, excluding tsunami. And if that trend continues, there will be a reduction in disposal for the next year in the range of 2 to 4%. I'm not sure what 1.4 million number you're looking at because our share of the transfer station revenue is budgeted at more like 900,000. I think you're looking at the Hambro payments. And if you're looking at the auditor's report and trying to pull that number out of there and extrapolate it, I would have to give you some further clarification on that if that's what you want to look at.
I'm just not sure why we keep putting 1.8 million. We haven't hit that for the last few years on the transfer station operations.
Yeah, I know we've had this discussion before, so let me try to explain. The payments to Hambro are based on their portion of the revenue that comes into the transfer station, and then that's passed through to them. So this year you'll see a 1.8 and a 1.8. It's intended to be a number that doesn't get exceeded. We reduced it this year because you said last year you wanted to see that number smaller. I think we've reduced it to the point that it's going to be pretty close to that number this year. But that's the Hambro side of the revenue. It's not our side of the revenue. Our side of the revenue is coming in at pace with the projections. And yes, it's because we had a rate increase. The rate increase was because we were losing money. Last year, the discussion was we're running a structural deficit and we need to have a revenue stream that matches our expenses. The last several years, we've gotten comments from our external auditor pointing out that our revenue stream is not keeping pace with our expenses. This is the choice that the board has. All of our revenue comes from the transfer station and franchise fees. Both of those revenue streams are coming in at pace with our projections for this year, and I believe they will be at or above the revenue projections for this year. Those are documented facts.
Well, when we...
Will it change next year? From this point, then it's only a projection or an estimate of what could change next year.
We still haven't addressed the issue of reducing expenses. And when this board has the guts to start saying, let's do a 10 or 20% reduction in payroll and benefits and cut out the 5% step up, then we're doing our job, and then we wouldn't have to be continually thinking about how to increase the rates.
Kevin, remind me how often they can raise the CPI comes in. Is it every year?
Annual.
So they could raise, this could happen every year, 3% every year for the term of the?
It's based on the consumer price index. So
Right.
it depends on what the consumer price index is. That's what's embedded in both contracts with Recology and Hambro. This is the commitment that we made to them.
And that consumer price index, is that regional or is it nationwide? Or
Yes.
what index do we use?
It's CPIU, it's for all urban consumers, it's nationwide.
So I'm in agreement with not wanting to raise our rates at the transfer station, but honoring our contract. But the thing you have to struggle with is that we're going to be paying more with that CPI. And so that's going to be a higher expense yes. And so if we don't raise the rate to match the extra expense, then we're going to see our budget numbers go down. So that's just something we have to decide.
Well, at some point, we're going to have to put a fix in there someplace. I don't think we can stand to have it go up 3% every year for the term of the contract. But I do believe that we need to honor our contract that is in place.
It's actually up to 3%, and
I know that's the
and
cap.
they can actually choose to take it or not.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'd do. No, that's not doing
I'm just saying.
it. Just saying.
Just saying.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
I would like to comment on a couple of things, and that the CPI comes around annually. When a company finds itself paying $5 a gallon for gasoline, and they wrote the contract 2 years ago, and when they bid the contract, and it was $3 a gallon for gasoline, that has to be, they can't come in and get a rate change on that. That's not where the rate changes come from. The rate changes are only on the CPI. And the CPI, it's my understanding, I think that Hambros is 80% and Recology is 85%. Hambros has a 3% limit embedded in their contract. Recology's contract is a straight CPI. Now, I would like to address just momentarily about salaries. We just had the SEIU president. Well, we have the SEIU president here that would like to explain to you how, aren't you the president? Yeah, he's here. We have contracts with our employees. And our employees have negotiated contracts.
Hold on to your...
You may not have to say anything. I'm just saying that when you start throwing out numbers about doing that, I want to be fair to our employees. You know, we want to honor their contract, and we want to honor the contracts of our private partners. So to me, talking about, and I will ask for this in a ballpark figure of what it would be per ton in relationship to the 3% that would also go to the solid waste, that is looking at additional charges from water quality, that's looking, you know, we've been hit with a lot of additional charges, that's where the money's going. So Kevin, could you tell me approximately what that 3% would mean in relationship per ton?
If the total increase is approved at about $4 a ton, 2/3 of that is payment to Hambro, and 1/3 of it is to us. So that would be about $1.20, $1.30 per ton savings if we don't increase our portion of the tipping fees.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Mr. Miles.
I think Ms. Westfall asked a very important question. See this little package of paperwork? Well, the federal government, my Social Security didn't get an 83% cost of living increase. God, I wish we got a 3%.
That's what this is.
Okay, but I'll tell you what really bothers me is the increase. I mean, Tommy's got to make a living because the employees have to make a living. The gas rates are going up. Fine and dandy. Hambro's employees is employment, a workers' company. I mean, it's the workers who are invested in that company, and they deserve a living in this community. But Donna's right about something. You guys control what the authority charges. And I don't think you're being very creative. Like I kept telling Mr. Finnegan, you got a piece of property out there that can be sold. It's got timber on it. That could be developed into, what is it, industry park or whatever. You got green waste that could be composted somewhere and sold. You don't do nothing with that. Until this board, with the help of the task force, starts looking at ways that you can make money to offset the cost that you're not getting over the scale, people like me are going to suffer. Now, unfortunately, I can't use the county dumpster like I've done in the past, or I'll get in trouble for that. But if the cost of my garbage goes up, I don't want to get cited for blight.
Thank you, Richard. Any other public comment?
Even though we talk about residential rates and we've got our residential rates real competitive, and I'm looking at the commercial rates, and I'll have to go back and digest these, but it was my understanding that we're basing and keep our residential rates lower because we raise the rates commercially. And the commercial, when you look at how much the the transfer station, the economics of the transfer station and what you can do for the citizen in keeping rates down, you have to compare what commercially they took a big jump last time. And a lot of commercial people started being self-haulers instead of using collection services because the price went so far up. So if you're sitting and saying, okay, well, our residential rates are well within reason, and your commercial rates are what's packing the load, and then people start moving out of the commercial and start self-hauling, then all of a sudden, you're looking at a year down the road, a time limit down the road, that you're not getting the tipping fees because the commercial what was paying to keep the residential low.
Thank you, Andy. Any other public comment?
David Mason, speaking as the chapter president for SEIU 1021 Del Norte. Just want to point out that the solid waste rank and file employees have a 5-year contract, was negotiated, agreed, and signed to. This is not the city of Bell. They're not paid extravagant salaries. We have minimum staffing, people making just barely a living wage. The latest HUD figures I've looked at said that a living wage for Del Norte County is $14 an hour. Less than that is not a living wage. If we had an overinflated staff with overinflated salaries, perhaps, but that is not the case, simply isn't the case.
Dave, I'd just like to respond that most of my constituents make under $14 an hour.
As do most of the county employees.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Lonsdale again. I remember the difficulties that Councilmember Shalong and Supervisor McClure went through in negotiating these contracts in a very spirited open bidding process. And this room was crowded a lot before we finally settled on the contracts that we had. I disagree with some of the folks running for office that a contract can simply be torn up and thrown away. I don't think it's as easy as that. And so I don't particularly see a problem for you in going ahead with the CPI increases. As a matter of fact, some members of your board who also sit on the Redwood Coast Transit Authority Board had to agree to a similar arrangement with their contractor who runs the buses. Where we have a difficulty, I think, is in having an allocation that allows opponents of the waste management district, and there are probably folks out there with some long knives that want to disestablish the district, of having it appear that the district is self-enhancing through the 3% that it's taking off the top from the transfer station. Now, Mr. Hendrick has started the process today of raising the very spirited and vigorous and rigorous defense of the need for that. But I think that that needs to be examined more closely and apart from the contract revisions. And I trust that based on what's been said here today, that the case can be made for the district to get what it needs, but the case has to be made. Otherwise, the people who are opposed to the districts are going to use it against the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I will bring it back to the commission. What is your pleasure? We're talking about 5.1.
Mr. Hemmingson, I'd just like to point out, I was actually, you've seen me looking down at my lap, and I'm looking at the actual contracts with both Recology and Hambro, and it's apparent that we're into binding arbitration if we don't approve these CPI increases. And I imagine we'd just be spending money on attorneys during that period, and that's not something, and with all due respect, that's not something we choose to do.
Is that a motion?
With that, we're kind of, I don't know if we're taking all these together or apart, but I think...
Let's take 5.1 at this point. I know we've been talking about both of them, but let's take the Recology up first, and we'll do the 6.1 next, or 6.2 next, excuse me, and then we'll work on...
Well, then, based upon what I was just stating, I would move for 5.1.
Okay.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion from commissioners?
Just one point I'd like to make on the residential. We had talked about the residential rates in the city are going up 81 cents a month, which is tolerable because we do have low rates in our city. And I happen to be a residential user. a lot of people are in our city. So just speaking for residential at 81 cents a month for a year is probably a bargain in my book. Considering our power went up 18% and other things are, that 81 cents a month for picking up the garbage is pretty reasonable.
Well, any increase is too much when you have no more money to spend. And that's just the situation so many of our constituents are in.
And that's in every city. And so it's just not us. And at $23, when I lived in the Bay Area and I moved away 10 years ago, I was paying $90 a month for trash pickup at my house. 90. And I'm just glad I don't have to pay that here, being retired. Yeah, you didn't hear that.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Excuse me. Commissioner Westfall? No. Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamara?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure? No, excuse me. Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
And Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Chair.
Jerry?
Chair Higginson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to take a minute, and I think we're going to discuss 6.2. Well, let's see. We're going to discuss 6.2, and it's basically the same issues. So if you've got something different to add, I would love to hear your comments. If you're going to go over the same things that we've already heard, if you would just say, you're more than welcome to get up and just say that you have the same comments, would be great for the public. So, yes.
One thing I forgot to mention regarding change order 15, which is item 6.2. This change order also eliminates harbor dredge from the list of services that they provide, and the basic reason for that is that when harbor dredge comes in, there's a whole bunch of it, and there's more material there to be handled than can be reasonably handled at the transfer station.
Yeah, I think we had that discussion at the last meeting. So, 6.2. I've skipped 6.1 for just a minute. I want to go on to 6.2 because it's basically the same issue, so I would open it up for public comment. Seeing no public comment, then let's bring it back to the board for discussion, if any.
I would make a motion to accept the increase according to the CPI and the 3% cap and elimination of harbor dredge disposal services. And I just want to reemphasize, when it's in a contract, we can't do anything about it.
Understood. Okay, I have a motion?
Second.
A motion and a second. Comments from commissioners? Okay. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Westfall?
No.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamara?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Chair Higginson?
Yes.
Thank you. It passed.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to go back. I see that Mary Wilson is here. If she's got a report for us from the Solid Waste Task Force, I would take that at this time, if you're ready, Mary.
Yes, thank you for waiting for me. I had some business I had to attend to. My report would be on our last meeting that we had on May 10th. We gave a public workshop for businesses and landlords regarding the new statewide commercial recycling mandate that goes into effect July 1st. And we also gave a presentation on the solid waste responsibility ordinance that was passed. And it was, I felt, a very productive meeting. We ran it kind of informally. We got a lot of concerns, particularly the largest concern was put forward by the landlords regarding them being named as responsible party, which put them, which meant they would be responsible and they would potentially have civil penalties, administrative civil penalties, and criminal actions with a $1,000 fine and 6 months in jail. That is in the ordinance, and their concern was that if their tenant were to do something illegally, if they were the responsible party. So that was generated quite a bit of discussion. Again, I felt it was very productive. A lot of notes were taken. In addition, I've also received from the public in regards to the ordinance from Bayside Realty, some of the realtors there have put forward some comments and in regards to the ordinance. So we'll be working on that in the task force and reviewing it. It looks like it's going to take a bit of time to go over the detail. The next thing I'd like to report on was that I've been approached in regards to there are some openings on the solid waste task force, and that some of the gentlemen that have put their name in needed some direction in regards to what the procedure is to move forward with that. It was kind of confusing. They have put their time in, I guess, at the city council. The procedures changed a bit, and so they were asking for some clear direction in regarding to how that procedure now is taking place, and I didn't really know what to say. And the third thing that I'd like to report on is just, again, I've been looking at the operational costs. Personally, the revenue and expenses, started collecting information. I know last time the board directed the staff to take a look at some of the different solid waste programs around and to compare to what we have as far as sustainability. So just on a personal note, have started collecting some information on that. Haven't brought it up before the task force at this time, but looking at different population data, different tons, the number of staff, whether they're public or private, have collected a lot of information from many different counties and cities, so that, and I know the staff is doing their own research too, so that we'll be looking at that. So basically that's my report, but I did feel we had a productive public meeting.
When is your next meeting?
Let's see, so it's the second Thursday, and
so June?
What date is that? Do you have that in front of you there?
In June?
No?
June 14th.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Regarding
June 14th?
The second Thursday is June 14th.
Regarding the city council meeting last night, we are not dragging our feet on that, as Mrs. Dickey asked earlier. I'm sure her son will be appointed to that committee. We just had some clarification we wanted to do, and we'll probably make those appointments on June 4th. So you probably will have at least 2 new members.
Okay.
We were trying to see if we needed to have some city representation, more city representation on there. And if that's not required, then we will appoint who's applied.
Okay.
So it's not a matter of dragging our feet. As you can tell, in fact, Mr. Nunn, he's not here now, served on the ad hoc committee and would be a very good member on that. But 2 weeks won't make a difference since your meeting doesn't come until after our next council meeting.
Yeah, it was a question.
And then,
I
how
didn't
many
know
members
the answer.
do you have now?
Is it 7? I'm just about to count in my head.
9.
9.
You have 9, so 2 more will be 11.
That was,
And that includes the resignation of Clark Moore.
Yes.
Right.
Do you want more than 11 people, or is that manageable with 11?
I just felt that was what was put forward at the Public Resources Code, and
Okay. All right. I'm just asking if
Yeah,
we should advertise again for more people.
The amount on the task force is not defined by the Public Resources Code. I think it was defined by the supervisors as 11.
All right. So we should have 2 more people on board for your meeting.
Yeah, I can see
because
there's a
that'll come
lot
back
of
to us.
detail that it would help to have different people looking into doing some research.
Thank you.
Good, thanks, Mary. Okay, we'll move on to 6.1. Yes, Richard.
I'd like to make at least the county aware of something, because I mentioned this last night at the city council meeting. I think the meeting with the landlords went real well. I'm aware that both Kevin and Ted invited the city's housing director to that meeting, and because of a short notice, she was not able to attend. Because of the issues we're dealing with, the tenants and the landlords, and because the housing authority in reality is a county and city housing authority, I would hope there'd be some way, because I believe after maybe the next two meetings, we can resolve this issue about the landlords and the tenants and the mandatory recycling and all of that, that somehow a big open invitation of the city's housing director is more than welcome to come to our meetings, because I think we need her input.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the report, on the Solid Waste Task Force report?
I'm sure that there's no surprise that I attended that meeting. It was hot, it was spirited, it was well balanced, it was extremely well handled. I've been to quite a few board meetings, and one of the best meetings I've ever been to as far as how the public was handled by Mary Wilson. The woman can walk across water when it comes to dealing with difficult people. You have to remember that when people come to a board like this or to any other board, they have serious concerns, and some of those are extremely emotional. And when they're heard, oftentimes that diffuses their anxieties. That woman should be able to handle any meeting that you would put in front of her. I was very impressed, and I thought you should know that.
Thank you. Any other comment on the Solid Waste Task Force report? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to 6.1. Discussion possible action regarding approval of the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2012-2013.
Okay, I hope you've had a chance to look at the staff report and the budget. I guess it's worth pointing out that the draft budget compared to last year's budget is reduced by $156,000 less in this coming year compared to last year. So it is smaller. We have identified all of the lines where we have had the opportunities to cut expenses, and we have. There are a number of lines where our expenses, especially as they relate to our payments to the county for county services, mostly have gone up, but those are still a good deal for us because the services we get from the county, I don't believe we could get anyplace else cheaper. There was a question asked about life insurance and comments about my age at the last meeting, so I thought I would start with that. The life insurance budget is part of, let's see if I can refer you to the first page after the draft budget has a summary of numbers that have been provided by the county auditor. Included with that is a charge, an annual charge of $41.40, where every employee Every full-time permanent employee pays that. And then there's an additional life insurance cost of $1,299, and the board had questions that I was not able to answer last time, so I'm prepared for that. And Clinton was here earlier, I think, because I was asking him to clarify it for me. So here's what I know based on my conversations with the county auditor. First of all, the county and the Solid Waste Authority have a memorandum of understanding with employees, so these benefits are defined in that MOU. The benefits for life insurance for the solid waste employees is exactly the same as all the employees in the county. And so every county employee has a $15,000 life insurance policy at no cost to the employee. That's for the price of $41.40 a year. So the mainstream employees, full-time permanent employees, get that. Then in the same MOU and in the same section of the MOU, in our case it's section 9.5, mid-management and professional employees are also provided life insurance equal to 1 year's gross pay at no cost to the individual. So the $1,299 is part of the cost of providing that insurance. That would be Rose and Ted. And then the third party in that cost of $1,299. So there are basically 3 people that are provided life insurance out of that $1,299. The $41.40 that is also charged to me, Ted, and Rose is contributed toward the life insurance policies that we have. So we don't have 2 life insurance policies. The main, all staff get the base $15,000, mid-management get 1 year, and when I considered working here, I was offered a contract that included a 1.5 years of life insurance. So that's what my policy is. That is the explanation of that cost. And so it includes more than I think we figured.
Okay.
But it's the same as what is exactly.
So it's just a negotiated benefit from the beginning, right?
Hmm?
It was just a negotiated benefit from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in my case and in the case of the other employees, it's part of the MOU that was negotiated. Our MOU was negotiated or finalized March 2011 for our employees here. So that's the life insurance question. Is that clear? Okay, so it's not so much because I'm old.
Not so much.
Not so much, not so much.
Kevin, when we talk about negotiated union contracts, and I'm not sure you're the person to ask this, but let's say for some unknown reason, our revenues dip by 50%. Are we stuck in that 5-year contract come hell or high water?
You know, I don't have the MOU with me, but there are provisions for reopening those negotiations, and with the board's direction, in the right circumstances, we could do that.
It's the same process that we go through as city council people negotiating MOUs with our employees.
So on a related point that Donna's brought up, there are 4 employees that would be eligible for the 5% step increase because the way that and this also is part of contracts. These are the benefits and the pay that was offered.
This for next year?
This is for the coming, we're talking
For
about
this
the
budget.
budget for this year.
And you put it in this budget?
The 5% for the 4 people is included in this budget, so it is budgeted for, and that, once again, the county auditor helped to review the personnel costs and including the 5% step increases for the 4 people. And the reason there aren't more, we have 10 employees, 2 are part-time temp, and the others, in theory, are eligible for step increases, but once you get to a certain plateau, at year 10, you have to wait to year 15, year 20, and et cetera. So some, for example, if I'm successful and I'm still here in March, next year, that will be my 20-year anniversary. So then I would be contingent on a satisfactory evaluation and board approval. I would be eligible for a 5% step at that point.
So the 5% step increases for employees are every 5 years?
No, at the beginning, they're every year until you get to a certain plateau.
Until 5 years?
Right.
Okay.
And so what would it take to eliminate or defer the step?
Renegotiate the MOU.
Yeah. You'd have to negotiate the contract or contracts.
Okay.
So that addresses a step increase. Let's see. Perhaps I should pause and see if I can answer any other questions. Well, let me point out, because I've heard this a lot, and I know that there's a lot of people talking about these issues, but I've heard the phrase that we've somehow run up a $2 million debt, or that I just heard it again today, that we have somehow created a $2 million debt. Now, just today I looked back, because we've had annual audits done since we started. Actually, I should clarify that for a period of time we were doing audits every 2 years. But I went back to the audit and for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 1998. And at that point and in that audit, our post-closure and closure liability was $7,742,988. That's where we were in 1998. And so when you look at, if you're only looking at the most recent years, and you're looking at our post-closure liability of $2,600,000, that seems like a large number. If you were only taking a snapshot in time and only looking at the last couple of years, then that would seem like a big number. But if you step back in time and you look at where we were when we started, and as you all know, when the JPA was formed, the county and the city agreed that all the debt and liability should go to this agency. So by the definition of the formation of this, we were given all the debt and liability. It was much higher. Between 1998 and 2011, that liability has been reduced by more than $5 million. So it was $7.7 million, and now it's $2.6 million. So I think you should have that for perspective to understand where we are in time and where our budget sits at this point, because you see that in the audit, and you'll see it over time.
Where did that $5 million come from? Did that come from the ratepayers?
The $5 million that was
paid back.
spent, well, that was closure.
Liability.
That was land. The first number included
went from
landfill.
$7 million, and now it's down to $2 million. So
it first included closure and post-closure. Now we have completed closure. So the closure costs were paid as we closed the landfill, and that was so those were actual expenses out the door. Now, where did that come from? Some of it came from a parcel fee that was adopted before I got here, which was very unpopular to the point that the voters were convinced to approve a half-cent sales tax to go for a landfill closure. That sales tax over a 5-year period had generated about $4 million. Again, important perspective to have, because people that remember when the landfill was free or almost free, it in fact wasn't as free as it might have appeared at the time, because in order to catch up, when this county started getting enforcement orders from Regional Water Quality Control Board and from California Integrated Waste Management, there was a lot of catching up to do. So the parcel fee that the Board of Supervisors adopted helped to make up for the lack of charges at the transfer station, because we weren't charging enough to pay for the closure or post-closure. And then that half-cent sales tax that went on for 5 years helped to bring up the cash balance to the point that we could, in fact, close the landfill. Now, the post-closure liability that still is on our books is not a cash outlay as much as it is a calculated liability that shows up on our audits. And you may recall from previous conversations we've had at this meeting that we are applying for a reduction in that 30-year post-closure estimate, and we estimate that, and we're still working on it, that we can get that reduced by 6 years down to 24 years, which would knock that liability down by $535,000. So the numbers of things that we can look at, that we will continue to look at, that will help to make this budget stronger. Right now you have a balanced budget with reasonable expectations for revenue. If revenue doesn't come in at the rate that we are projecting, the worst case is that we will have less than the $110,000 that we're currently budgeting for reserve. And this budget includes a budgeted amount for depreciation of $110,000. So we would have to be significantly below revenue projections for us to start digging a deeper hole for ourselves. We want to be able to put that money aside in reserve, and we have a budget that suggests that that's possible. The future disposal is a little hard to predict, but we did provide you some information on the past disposal, this current year's disposal projected to the end of the year. We provided information on disposal excluding tsunami debris, so you could see what that looks like without assuming the tsunami debris. And so there are a number of other things that could help us, and I don't know that you need to decide on these today, but the actions in front of you today are provide whatever comments, thoughts, or direction you have on this budget. Give me direction to present it, as I always do every year, to the city and the county separately, and then come back for a public hearing for final adoption in June. The things that we can consider that you might give us direction to consider if you want to include one thing that we will continue to talk about, that is the $52,000 water quality fee. That's has us in a category that we think is unreasonable and unfair. If we can reduce our ranking from 1A to 1B, we save $10,000. If we can reduce our ranking from 1A to 2B, we would reduce our costs by more than $30,000 a year. So we definitely want to pursue that, because that $50,000 chunk of money that keeps getting added on is having a major impact on our expense. The second thing that we can look at, I believe we should look at, is the basis for depreciation, because we are now funding depreciation at $110,000 a year. I'd like to continue to work with the county auditor and go through the steps that he went through to calculate the basis for that depreciation, because in my looking at the calculation for that, it appears that the basis for depreciation may be almost $1 million higher than it needs to be because of some of the expenses that were included that are not depreciable expenses. If we reduce the basis for depreciation by the $989,000 that I think is justified, our annual depreciation costs are reduced by $24,000. Now we're behind in accumulating that, so we still want to aggressively put money aside, but the amount that we would legally be required to put aside every year could be reduced by another $24,000. There is some possibility that we can reduce our monitoring costs, our lab costs, because every water sample we collect, we send off to a lab. And over time, there are some things that are not telling us anything new, especially as it relates to stormwater. We basically have stormwater running off a clean landfill. There are some provisions possibly where those water testing costs could be reduced, and I intend to look at those this year. We could consider, and this may not be the right timing considering the financial scrutiny that the agency is undergoing, but the JPA does allow for, and the board could provide for, biennial audits rather than annual audits. We spend, this year, we have $8,850 budgeted for an annual audit. If the public could be served, and the board could be as well informed by having audits every 2 years, that would save almost $9,000. I'm moving into those are likely, or at least your discretion, but likely possibilities, into the realm of possible, but maybe not as likely. I know Donna has asked before on whether it's possible to reduce the cost of our loan. And I know that the county was going to check in to see whether the iBank had any flexibility on that. And again, I think this may not be likely, and I'm not selling this very well at this point, but our payments to the county are marked up 0.25%. So what the county pays to the iBank is 0.25%, a lower interest rate than what we pay to the county. The cost savings if the county were to bring us down to the par with what the county is paying the iBank would be a savings of $5,879 a year, and over the term of the lease agreement would be about $170,000 saved over the term of the payment. In the category of needs more work, but clearly there's value, I know Richard has brought it up before that we have 5 acres C4 zoning adjacent to the transfer station. I think the board can help decide what to do with that, whether it's there's any possibility of leasing that land out to a viable private entity. It's always been intended to be used by private business adjacent to the transfer station. We always envisioned it as something that would be a recycling-based business. One of the options we had looked at was a reuse center, which Hambro has taken on themselves in their own property, so we don't have the need for that. But it is 5 acres that is pre-developed. It has all utilities stubbed out at the end of it. It is a highly valuable piece of property, more valuable than when we bought it at. When we bought it for about $50,000 an acre. So if we were to sell that, it would be worth at least $250,000, which would help in the short term. If we wanted to look at the possibility of a lease along the model of what the airport does, where the county owns the land and leases property for hangars and other types of businesses, then I think both of those are viable options for increasing revenue that we don't currently have, that would help to cover the increasing costs without reducing services. I'm starting to get into the realm of really less likely, but I'm going to throw out, since we're all brainstorming on what do we do and how do we get more money, I think it's worth looking at whether the county could sell some portion of the landfill property, if anybody would find that useful. There's 160 acres out there. A big chunk of it is adjacent to state parks. Maybe they would want it. There are some pieces of property that are adjacent to residential neighborhoods that might be developable, 1 or 2 parcels for houses.
You could trade it to Fish and Game. That'd be good.
I'm just throwing out ideas because we're all in this together, and I could take my direction from you. And that, just to demonstrate that I have, in fact, given some thought to other sources of revenue other than raising rates, that we do have a need to have a long-term stable economic picture, because I think, as was pointed out earlier, that landfill is not going anywhere. You can't pick it up and move it. It will always be there. And we have at least a 24-year liability that we have to monitor and maintain it. And any source of revenue that we can have that would help to pay for that would be, without having a burden on the ratepayers, would be probably welcome. So I have thought about it. I think those are ideas, some of them more likely, some of them less likely. In some cases, we would save money at the expense of the county, which so far every county member I've mentioned that idea to was not warm to that idea. But it's sort of the nature of where we're at. We have about $85,000 a year in payments that we make to the county for services, where we help cost sharing for helping to pay for county staff that provide us services, where we help pay for liability insurance. We actually contribute to the county's audit because we're so closely embedded with the county. So we help pay for the county's audit, and we also pay for our own audit. Some of these expenses are not flexible and not negotiable, but I think it's important to at least have a perspective to understand where our discretionary cuts are more limited than you might imagine. And you can, I hope you would take my word for it, that we can't cut staff more without starting to look at cutting service days or service hours. So those are hard decisions.
I would prefer not to see any staff cut, but I do want to know in the MOU, is there a section that addresses reopening negotiations?
Yes.
And what section is that? That's in our big binder, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll
I
call you
think
later.
so. I think so.
All right.
And I had one question for Kevin. On those four people that you talked about earlier for the step increase, those are part-time permanent employees, is that correct? The four that you're talking about that are eligible this year?
One of them is me, full-time permanent. The other two are full-time permanent, and one of them is part-time permanent.
Okay. Oh, that's this year.
That's
the this
The new budget.
The new budget.
That's the new budget in this coming fiscal year. And those step increases are in the budget, they are included in the budget. And the total cost for those four people to get the 5% is $5,142. So that's the scope of the amount of savings that you would achieve if nobody got a 5%.
And looking at your staff, out of 9, 4 out of the 9 are part-time people. Is that correct?
I'd say 6 out of 10 are part-time.
Oh, 6 times, okay. All right, thank you. Or part-time.
Yes.
Okay.
4 full-time. Right?
Commissioner Sloan, you have something?
I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you, Kevin, for following up on a lot of the questions that we brought to you at the last meeting. I think that your report was pretty thorough and provided some really good information. As far as the iBank and the 0.25% to the county, for only $5,000 a year, I think we get a lot of service from the county for that money. They administer the program and the payments, and the auditor, I think, has done a great job working closely with you over the last year as our board, even prior to the super committee, directed you to do so. And so I think that's very worth the dollars that we pay. The post-closure liability, I just wanted to throw out there, correct me if I'm not correct, we can only get that adjusted every 5 years, correct? And it had not been adjusted, and that's why we're doing it now?
It has never been adjusted. We have requested it, and
Right.
it is somewhere in Sacramento right now. Do you know the answer to that? Can
I
you do it
think I
more
do.
than-
We couldn't apply until 5 years had passed.
Right.
But after this application, I think it's more frequent than 5 years. I don't know if it's annually, but I
For
think.
some reason, I thought it was every 5 years.
Yeah, probably you're remembering that we couldn't do it until after 5 years.
Okay.
And
Right.
so as soon as that passed, and now we're into year six, and so
Okay.
we're going to try to get, and that, understand that that's not a cash expense for us. It's a calculated engineer's estimate.
Correct.
That makes.
Liability on the
Yeah,
books.
but
Right.
if somebody looks at our audit and says, well, look, you have a $2 million hole, well, it's because we have this $2.6 million calculated liability that sits on.
It's always good to
on our
have
books.
accurate information out there. The other thing is,
try.
I like the idea of selling the landfill property.
Well,
He said surrounding.
I know.
No, and I should,
Well, I liked Andy's, proposal to just dig it up and haul it away. But I'm just wondering if there's any risk mitigation that would have to be done.
you know what, I'm trying to demonstrate that I have, because I've heard you, and there are no easy solutions, there may be no palatable options for you, but that I have thought about it. That when I look at, because you rely on me to both understand the budget, understand the expenses, and understand not only our responsibilities, but our relationships.
Right.
And I agree with you that the relationship we have with the county and the services we get from the county, I never complain about those. But when we are being hammered for spending too much money, I think everybody needs to understand how those costs, where our money goes.
Right.
And it's our staffing and our operating expenses are a fairly reasonable portion of the total expenses. When you throw on top of that the $200,000 a year we pay for the loan, that's a big chunk of money. We have to pay it. We can't cut that. And the only place we can cut is when you ask me to look at Can it be renegotiated? Well, I'm just going to tell you where those options are, and then you decide what you want to do.
And the last comment that I wanted to make, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I see no point in you presenting this again to the city and the county separately because we're all here. We used to do it because it was just a couple members of each board, and so it needed to go back to the full board of each, but I don't see a reason for him to present it
Yeah, and
again.
I think maybe the answer around that is to agendize a city and a county meeting right after, to follow the June meeting, and, because I think it's written in the bylaws, it's got to be presented to both the city and the county. So if you
Still in the
want-
JPA
Be
that I
easy way
have to
just
do it.
to-
I'm scheduled on the 4th to come to the city and on the 12th.
But we are, but we are the entire board for each, was my point. I think it used to be that way because you were only presenting it to the Solid Waste Authority, which consisted of 2 city members and 2 county members and a public member. And that's why you were directed to present it to both boards separately, but because we're all here, I feel like it's just an extra step.
But we haven't changed the JPA yet, and that's why I decided that we should have it be separate, because it hasn't been changed in the agreement yet. And that's why I made that decision as mayor.
But it'd be an easy solve for the June thing to
Well-
agendize 2 or 1 item for a city meeting and a county meeting. We can even, probably from the county meeting, just continue it on to start after, or start and finish after the solid waste meeting.
I don't think that's going to change anything if the city and the county are
Well,
both agendize a meeting
I'm on the
that would
schedule
fit
for
the-
the June 4th City Council meeting and the June 12th Board of Supervisors meeting, and I'm timed for the supervisors, which I love that, because then it won't take a long time. And if I try to answer all your questions now, then there won't be a lot of questions at the supervisors, but it is still in the JPA that I'm supposed to do that. And even if you give direction on how you want to change the JPA, then the JPA has to go to the city and the county for adoption before that's changed too. So it's not going to change before this gets adopted. I have no problem with coming to your meetings. I'm happy to do it.
I was just trying to save you some time.
I
Well,
do-
but
I do
the plan is
appreciate
for the
that.
public hearing and adoption will be
Here,
will be here.
yeah,
Yeah.
June 26th, I think.
What is?
The final
public hearing
adoption.
and adoption will be the 26th of
Oh,
June.
okay.
That'll all be done here.
Right.
so.
So you give me whatever direction today, whatever information you want, comments or changes, then I package that up based on your comments, take it to the city and the county, and we're back here in a month to get it adopted final, and then we continue. I suggest that we continue to talk about the ways in which, looking at the big numbers, looking at some of the big costs, where there is potential for us to trim those costs, and really the most viable is we get some level of success in reducing that water quality fee, because it's huge.
Yes, it is. Any other comments, questions from commissioners? Any public comment? Okay.
We don't have a plan yet on how we're going to get this fee reduced.
We do.
We do have a plan?
Yes. It's a secret.
Okay, well, we don't want to divulge any secrets in a public meeting, because
No.
then they're not secrets anymore.
No, because sometimes there are provisions for closed sessions to have those conversations.
Okay, good.
I'm just saying.
Got ya.
Any public comment on the proposed or the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2012, 2013? Okay, seeing no public comment, I will entertain a motion.
Well, it's just for review.
Just approval of the preliminary.
I think if you were going to vote on anything, if you could vote to set the public hearing for next month, that would probably be adequate direction for us.
Okay,
So moved.
have a motion?
Second.
A motion
Second.
and a second. Do we need to poll that?
You know, this voting structure is so cockamamie. I probably should.
All those in, oh, okay.
It's got to be 3 and 3.
Okay, you're right. Rose, would you poll the vote, please?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yep.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamer?
Yes.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Westfall? Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes.
Thank you. Passed.
Okay.
Kevin, is it possible that you could get a parcel map to me on the landfill? Is it all one APN number?
No, I don't think so.
160 acres, I would guess not. Can you say
Yeah.
it's 160?
It's a,
Pardon?
Yes, we have that information.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, just put it on, get it on Google.
yeah, we know where to get the parcel maps in any case.
I want to see parcel numbers and then we'll look and see what the zoning is.
Okay?
Okay, moving on to item 7.1. We got some amendments we're working on. Kevin, you want to?
Yeah, the last meeting I got direction to address the ordinance concern and anything else that board members came up with, and I took the liberty of updating some additional things. So we'll take our direction from you today and modify this as needed. Ted's going to flash up one slide that just provides an overview of the things that we did change. The location of the office, the address, the updated purpose to make it more clearly relevant to what we're doing right now. There was a recommendation several years ago to provide for an alternate public member, and the timelines for the budget had in two places where it had to be adopted 90 days before July 1st and also by June 1st. So there were conflicting timeframes for budget adoption. And then I think probably the most significant thing is how you want to approach ordinances, whether you want to have any ordinances or any power to do ordinances. What I'm going to suggest that we do is if you just take your binder and start with page 1, I'm going to show you where these changes are because there aren't so many that I couldn't just walk you through it. On page 3, the office is 1700 State Street. I just simply changed the address from, the original one was we were in the mortuary on 5th Street, I think, on page 5, the purpose is more detailed and more clearly, specifically relevant to where we are. I'm going to come back to that if we need to discuss that in detail, but I'm just going to give you the highlights. On page 6, under number 3, all the changes are underlined, and anything that's been deleted you'll see in the right-hand margin. This provides the option for the appointed members to select an alternate to the 5th member. This was suggested several years ago in case the public member was not able to attend, so that's an option whether you want to keep that in or not, and even if it was in the JPA, it's still an option of the board to decide whether to do it. Starting on page 7 is where I started clarifying the time frame for the fiscal year. Fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. You know all this. The budget adopted no later than June 30th because we need to have it before the fiscal year starts. Page 9 is something that I'll look for your direction on. The options are where it defines powers and functions is to add the word rate. So the only power that this board has is to do rate ordinances, but no other ordinances. Alternatives to that would be to delete the word ordinance altogether, which means you would eliminate all possibility of any ordinances ever, including rate ordinances, being adopted by this board. And we can come back to that. On page 10, again, just a budget clarification. Not later than June 30th, the commission shall adopt a budget. And that's it. So when we approached this before, when we were considering or asking the city and county to consider the alternate member, it was recommended by our attorney that rather than doing amendments and just having a string of amendments, that when you amend the JPA, you should actually just adopt an amended JPA, which includes everything. So the first two amendments have been squashed into this. There's no changes to those. They've just been placed in the appropriate place in this agreement. So there's other things that are not underlined or highlighted, but were previously adopted and simply just integrated into this agreement.
We did change one, page 6 actually on voting commissioners' compensation is there is no compensation. That was actually voted on already.
You're talking about the
stipend.
The JPA that set this board? And that, you know, you tell me that.
Yeah, it was, I think.
This,
it's
what
second
this
meeting
says
we
is
voted on.
that, yeah, clearly you can delete that if you want to.
Well, no, I think we did, is what I'm saying. We did it
Oh,
in the second
okay.
meeting. It's been done. It just hasn't been corrected in this.
Okay, so you want to delete that whole paragraph? I mean, help me just do it.
I'm on
Page
page 6.
Page 6.
Page 6.
Second to
number
last
3.
paragraph says, voting commissioners shall be compensated for time spent and reimbursed for reasonable and necessary expenses incurred in the performance of their duties shall be provided in the bylaws. And I guess that's why
Well, we did vote on it second meeting to pull it. So.
the second meeting of this board.
Of the super board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so then that needs to be changed so that can be adopted by the city and the county. So do you want to be able to be reimbursed for expenses?
No. Well, reimbursement, you mean travel expenses and
Yeah.
stuff? That sounds reasonable if it's out of town.
It's set in the
You know,
bylaws.
there's actual wording on other JPAs and other government entities that says, you know, if it's above and beyond, if I'm traveling from my house to the county building, there's no reimbursement.
No.
But if I'm going from here to San Diego, then there's reasonable expense on that. So, but I forget the exact verbiage on there because there is verbiage for government reimbursement of travel. So I guess that's how I would phrase it. Is
We
it
have a
budget?
travel policy. Right.
Yeah.
That's separate, right?
But time spent isn't one of them.
Yeah. So delete that whole paragraph?
I
think we already have.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm just saying. I'm going to change it on my form so that I've got it right.
This is, the voting commissioners shall be compensated for time spent and reimbursed for reasonable and necessary expenses incurred in the performance of their duties.
So
Isn't that just a necessary reimbursement for
Yeah,
travel?
like travel and stuff, but I think it's a little more specific on the government code. That would be something that I think you still have to have the avenue to, if we're going to send a commissioner.
This is for
somewhere
time
to-
spent, not for travel.
Yeah, and it does say.
Time spent is.
It does, it does say that you can do that in the bylaws, but if you want to all be comfortable with deleting time spent, that would address your.
Yeah.
That would, I think that'll take care of it.
I think that takes care of it.
Just take care of it.
Just those two words.
Yeah.
Shall be compensated for reasonable.
Shall be reimbursed for reasonable, take out, shall be compensated for time spent completely.
And.
Shall
Just go
be,
voting commissioners.
right, take out the words
shall be
compensated for
reimbursed
time spent.
And.
Okay, so now it says voting commissioners shall be reimbursed for reasonable and necessary expenses incurred in the performance of their duties provided for in the bylaws.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. Cool.
Take out shall be, I think, too. Performance of their duties
Shall
as
be.
provided in the bylaws.
As provided, got it. Okay, thank you, good.
Did anybody have anything else?
I think the issue you had, and I'd like to bring it up at some future meeting, is the discussion of the makeup of when the super committee is gone, is I have a real problem with the member at large just sitting at will for 4 years without any kind of, the appointment process prior was they sat for 4 years and they're not elected.
Yeah.
And at least on our positions, potentially, we can be unelected from this board and, you know.
This is a real good time to address
Yeah.
all of your concerns. I think this is, if this takes 2 meetings to get it right, I think
the
it's
public
still
member
worth
can't.
getting it right. So, whatever
Well,
the
I
board
agree
wants.
I agree with Supervisor Sullivan because we can be changed every year by, a new chair.
Are you talking about the
On-
4-year
on
term
our
as a
board.
problem?
Well, I just have a problem that member at large really isn't accountable anymore.
At all.
They're not accountable at all right now. So I think there needs to be a mechanism so And I'd like to, because I think that would be a separate agenda item, that, let's not monkey with it today, but I do think we need to bring it back and say, how do we make this?
Well, let's find a way to do it, whatever we want to do.
It makes sense to get all the changes, because this is a process that has to go to the city and the county for adoption. You don't want to be amending this every other meeting. Let's try to get everything you want, that at least 6 of you want, and then let's get it
I agree with you. Get it as close. We know we've got an issue there that we want to rectify. Let's do it.
Let's talk it through.
So
How about if it was something like, at the option of the 4 appointed members, because then those 4 would be the selecting from the applicants. And with the approval of the city and county, would annually select an alternate member. And that means that annual doesn't mean it could be the same person.
Yeah. An annual
Because the
appointment
learning
sounds
curve
better.
is really high.
I was going to say at least every 2 years, because there is
So-
a lot to, I mean,
I'd be comfortable with
once
2
you
years.
start
So
learning about what
this,
you've done.
this board picks somebody, and then it gets ratified by the city and the county, and that's a
Yeah.
level of comfort you would have.
Yeah.
Okay, help me with the wording on that, Martha.
I have a quick question. Could that public member be a task force member?
Could be anybody.
Because,
Should it have to be?
Why don't we put the president of the task force on as the
well,
member at
I'm
large?
not necessarily
Task
saying it
force.
has to be the president, but
Task force is not a standing committee. It technically only has to meet every 5 years, so there are times when there isn't a task force, and you would still be meeting, or somebody would.
I was just saying, could the voting members choose somebody that's sitting on the task force? Because that person would be familiar with what we're doing.
Well, that would be whoever's picking, could be part of their rationale, but it goes through the MADI Act and you advertise for it.
I understand that. I'm asking, my question is it allowed
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
for them to sit on the task force as well as be a public member?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, I mean, Irene Tynes was sitting on the task force while she was a sitting city council member.
Yeah, anybody can be on it.
I have a question. On page 11,
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Rich, can you hold that thought? I wanted to get the words that Martha had, because I thought it seemed like
She's working
everybody
on that.
thought it was okay. So, 5th member chosen by 4 appointed members. What did you have, Martha?
I have the option of the 4 appointed members, and with a majority approval of both the city and the county. And then I haven't gotten to the public members the public member's appointment shall be reviewed biannually.
5th member chosen by the 4 appointed members.
And a
Reviewed and
majority of
ratified.
both boards. And with a
Majority vote.
You know, I really don't have a problem with it being an annual thing. I mean, we have a lot of annual appointments and, you know,
annual
things.
public member appointment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Public,
We're just
so.
saying that it's such a huge learning curve, though. That
And that's fine, we can keep that same person on, we can reappoint that same person if we, but I think we should, I think it should be a 1-year term.
You
Approved,
can,
Dan?
yeah, reviewing
you
it
don't
is fine,
like them,
because
then
what
get
if
rid
they're
of them
doing,
in a
yeah,
year.
they're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
They're not showing up.
So
they're
at
not-
the option of 4 appointed members, they may select no, I'm reading the wrong thing. 5th member chosen by the 4 appointed members and approved by the city council and board of supervisors on an annual
basis.
Got it. Okay, Rich, I'm sorry to.
on page 11, number 8, under termination, 8.2, if the city council, or the city decides, if the city council decides to withdraw from the solid waste management, it says that we're under no obligation relating to the assets or the liabilities. Does that mean that we are not liable for the landfill? That we can leave, the city can leave at any time?
City and the county.
I don't
Or
think the city's ever been liable for the landfill.
but you
So
don't
they're
get any
liable
of
for the landfill.
But it
not the
dissolves the
transfer
solid
station.
waste authority if one entity leaves. Is that correct?
It's not, none of those statements, I think, are 100% correct.
So the city might have some liability?
I think, in my opinion, when the JPA was formed, the city and the county avoided having this conversation by inserting the words that say, by joining this, you don't have any increased or decreased liability over the landfill. That was never defined, and I think, depending on whether you were the city or the county, you could probably argue both sides of that, whether the city has liability because your garbage always went there, whether the county has all the liability because the county owns it. I think it's still prudent to avoid that argument, but we can address that if you want. I don't think I can, I know I can't tell you the city doesn't have liability.
I read it says it has no obligation relating to assets or liabilities. Landfill's a liability, that means the withdrawing party doesn't have any obligation. I just want to know if that's true.
I'm not an attorney, and
I'm not either.
I'm not sure that I can say that that's true.
Well, we can ask her.
Well, I'll just say that the liability of the landfill existed before the JPA, so it might exactly what was, I think Kevin's right in that it was intended to be vague, and I think that if the authority were dissolved, this would be a contentious issue.
If the other side brought it up as an issue.
Yes, I think that
If the city decided to pull away from the authority and go on their own, the county would have to file a suit against the city to help pay the liability of the landfill. Or else it
something to
would
that
go.
effect.
Somebody
yes.
would have to do that, right?
Yes.
If there was a liability issue.
I just wanted to ask that because that's been out there.
I don't think there's a definitive answer to that, Rich, and you would find out when you did it.
And when this happened, when it was first formed, Rich,
Yes.
there were no assets. And now we have assets that the city can share in those assets. Because if you walked away from those assets, I mean, when I started, I came with the water wars, and people were, it was not a friendly time between the city and the county. And we could all win the lottery tomorrow and be gone from here, and the next group could be contentious and not very friendly to one another. And in theory, if we owned a transfer station, could the owner of the transfer station tell the city, take your trash somewhere else?
Yeah, they could.
You know, so we don't, you know, that's, I think, why it was vague, because it was designed not to, it was designed hopefully that we remain as a partnership. And I think that California law, as far as any landfills, anyone who ever dumped in that landfill has a responsibility for that landfill. So.
That's why there are lawyers and courts.
Yeah, and lots of money.
Yes.
Costs,
Okay,
which
so.
we don't have.
Yes, we don't.
Can we talk about ordinances? Because I'm not sure I found the right balance for you.
Yeah, I was happy enough with eliminating the word ordinances.
Yes, I
completely.
remember that. And then
And I'm still haven't changed my
Yeah.
mind on that, but that, I mean, I'm only.
I just want you to contemplate how, well, first of all, what that means is we could generate an ordinance that needs to be, if it was a program ordinance, then bring it to the city and the county and get it adopted, then everybody would be on board with it. But Martha pointed out that there has to be some provision that actually says that somehow we're empowered back to use it or enforce it. Because if you adopt it, if this board doesn't adopt it, it's not our ordinance. So there are complications with the potential enforcement. And I don't even know what that ordinance might be, because the one we have is probably going to keep us busy for the next 20 years. But taking out rate ordinances could be cumbersome. It could be a challenge. And I just wanted you to think about that, because after I thought about it again.
But aren't the rate ordinances once a year?
No, that's
Well,
not.
the rate ordinance was adopted last June, and under the terms of the contracts, the rates are adjusted by resolution for the term of the contract. So there wouldn't need to be a master rate ordinance for 9 years from now, but things come up. For example, we're pretty sure that Hambro is going to want to have an increase in the brush rate because they're not able to burn the brush anymore. I think they've already given you a heads up to that. So that would be an example of where the rate ordinance would have to be, or an ordinance would have to be adopted to adjust the price for brush at the transfer station. We have a request, or anticipate a request for potential new services from the collection franchise, where if they have, for example, the interest in having a temporary brush disposal bin, we don't have a rate for that. That would take a rate ordinance. I'm trying to give you some specific examples of things that are coming up that I want you to contemplate whether those kinds of things are what you're talking about when you say no ordinances.
Okay, so you're concerned with the authority to apply the ordinance or to enforce the ordinance, or, I mean, if it's a county ordinance
If
and
the,
a city
if the
ordinance.
city and the county each adopt the ordinances as city ordinances and county ordinances, the authority does not explicitly have authority anywhere to enforce those.
So we would just give them the authority
You could
do that?
You could do that either as, you could probably do it in the ordinance, or you could maybe do it in the JPA with some kind of language as well.
But we could actually do it in the ordinance that we adopt to give them the authority to enforce.
I think so. I think that's kind of, we did something with the city and county and the wastewater treatment ordinance.
Yes, I mean, as long as we can, as long as there's got to be a way to do it. And I think especially since there, at some point, which we've kind of looked at, having a public member that is not accountable by the voting public, that ordinances should be passed by people who are going to have to be accountable.
And I completely understand, and I'm not arguing. Right. Whatever you want to do, I just want to make sure everybody understands the repercussions of eliminating all ordinances, including rate ordinances.
You could have some language in there that said that the ordinances that could be adopted by the Solid Waste Authority must be previously adopted by both the city and the county. And then you could still have an ability to get ordinances.
Just work it out.
Just however, whatever the language needs to be.
But I think it's real
We are
important
working
to
it out.
focus on these rate ordinances.
What do you want?
Because those are like if someone decided that they were going to start a composting and needed to have a rate for that, that's considered an ordinance here. And does that need to be approved by the city and the county?
I think you're just making it easier on everybody if you do. If you take that little extra step, and I think it's just a little extra step, the accountability then is placed on those people that were voted into office and can be voted out.
Hey, Jerry, are we going to, is the city and county going to consider doing that with all of our boards that have public members?
I don't know of any other public board that we have that does ordinances, so this,
Airport Authority.
I don't think we can do ordinances, only in our jurisdiction.
LAFCO, don't we do them there?
I think we do them everywhere at large.
And
We don't have ordinances. Ordinances are
But you're
law.
within your jurisdiction. Yes, it's within the airport district's jurisdiction.
What is
but
the
it's
airport
still-
district? We're just a
but
piece
it's
of
still-
land
but that
that we don't even
district-
own.
But that district still serves the entire county.
We serve regional.
Well,
We
I
serve-
know, but if you're rationalizing that the airport authority can have an ordinance because it affects just the airport, that's not true. An airport ordinance affects all
Anybody
of the
that uses
users
it
of the county.
But I don't know what ordinance that would be. I don't know what ordinance.
I don't know either. I'm
I
just
think
saying.
you just did one.
Well, let's-
You did one already.
Let's focus on this agency, because here we are.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to
Sorry.
cut you off.
That
but,
wasn't my fault.
I don't
just
have
think
strong feelings one way or the other. It's easy to change a word. If you take ordinances out of this paragraph, then all ability to do ordinances is gone. It's just that simple. That's
And
all
I'm
you have to
comfortable
do.
with that. That's all I said that from the start. I'm
Right.
still comfortable with it. And if somebody else has
I'm
a
not.
different direction.
I think you need the rate ones in there.
I thought we just said though that could be, the power could be appointed to solid waste on the individual
They're two
rate
separate things.
ordinances.
One is if the city and the county adopt a program ordinance and delegates to enforce it, then that's one thing. The routine or semi-routine need for rate ordinances is a separate question.
But I guess I'll go back to my question, how often does it happen during a year?
Not
Once,
often.
twice?
Not often.
5 times?
The rate
No,
ordinances?
not
Oh,
5 times a
up
year,
to
no.
5.
No, maybe once or twice a year, and it's usually small stuff. Like, next meeting, we'll probably have the fluorescent lamps back on, right, Jerry?
There you go. See, I missed it this time. So I've got it.
That would be a rate ordinance.
I just want to make sure everybody understands and whatever.
I don't want to see us strapped and not be able to create something that needs to be created. I just think, I agree that it should be approved by the city and the county as a whole, but I think there should be a way we can do that without removing it, which disallows us to do it.
Well, that's actually closer to what Mike said several times at several of the last meetings, is this board could
Well, then I
adopt an
agree with
ordinance,
him.
but it doesn't go into effect unless it gets also approved by the city and the county, which is a
And,
huge-
and I was good, and I was good with that from the start, too.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Is that better?
fine with me.
Yeah.
All right, see, this is the first time I actually could see consensus with Bobby Head.
Well, that worked for me. I don't see the difference, so. that
Well,
worked for me.
I see the difference in that I see a majority of people bobbing
There
their
you go.
heads. So,
Yes.
Can I just say I think there's a procedural difference, and there might be some time savings if we only need approval and not necessarily adoption by the city and the county, because you have to have, the notice and
So-
2 readings and all that, as opposed to reading it and saying, yes, we agree with this,
Adopt.
Okay.
and send it on to the authority board that would then adopt it and have the authority to also enforce it.
So if the city adopts and the county doesn't,
It doesn't go into effect.
doesn't go into effect,
Correct.
and vice versa. Okay.
yeah, so it's like,
Good with
this-
that.
it's like the board always has, city and the county have essential veto power over what this board does. 'Cause
Yeah,
if the city-
no, and I was good with that from the start, too. I thought just taking the ordinance out would make it simple. If that doesn't make it simple, just being ratified by the city council and the
Prior to
board of prior to enforce, or, yeah.
We did have one other language thing on page 7, the line 3, any compensation and reimbursement for expenses of the non-voting members shall be provided in the bylaws. I would change that to reimbursement for expenses of the non-voting commissioners, strike any compensation and.
What paragraph is that, Mike?
First paragraph, 3rd line down.
Which page are you on, Mike?
Didn't we
7.
already deal with that?
It's on 7.
Yeah.
No, we dealt
Top
with
of
page 7.
page
Okay,
7.
so delete compensation and,
Just strike out any compensation and leave reimbursement for expenses of the non-voting commissioner.
shall be provided in the bylaws. No, here.
I'm sorry, will you,
The top of page 7,
okay.
paragraph has a sentence, second sentence says, any compensation and reimbursement for expenses. And
So
Mike
any
wants,
reimbursement.
And that just cleans it up to what we voted on already.
yeah, it's consistency.
Yeah.
So it would say, any reimbursement for expenses shall be provided for in the bylaws. You okay with that? Yeah.
But we
got
don't
it.
have a non-voting commissioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be non-voting?
No, it does, the JPA allows for other entities to join the JPA.
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
separate
okay,
thing.
I get it.
Yeah, and so all we're doing is
Thank
cleaning
you.
it up across the board.
I was thinking that was the public member.
Yeah.
Right, but we covered the appointed member has to be approved by the city and the county on an annual basis. We're good with that. We're adding, we're keeping ordinances, but any ordinances have to be ratified by the city and the county, so we'll come up with.
On sorry to keep, page 6 in number 3, you've got the term of each commissioner shall be 4 years commencing upon the execution of this agreement without respect to when each position is filled, and that should just be strike from, we should take that out, because we're already going to do an annual appointment of the member at large.
And we do annual appointments.
And we do annual appointments of both the city and the county to this board anyway.
Term of each commissioner shall be 4 years commencing upon, delete that whole sentence.
Yeah.
Shall be 4 years commencing upon the execution of this, that respectively. Yep, that's all the words. Got it.
Mr. Lonsdale, did you have something to add?
This is good. I mean, I appreciate this. It's real specific. What do you need to make it? Well, I mean, address these issues. They've been bouncing around, and let's put it into words and make it useful.
But I think we could have had a whole meeting just on this.
Yeah.
Easily.
Well, thank you for your
We
patience,
are-
but I think
we've
it's
had
worth
two.
working through this.
I'd like to have seen that.
Yeah, great.
Mr. Chairman, members of the
Yes.
board, Bill Lonsdale again. I have 3 comments. One is that I agree with the folks who've spoken up with reservations about a voting public member on the board. Some people may recall that when the current contracts were voted on, the deciding vote was cast by, bless his heart, Mr. Reese, who's a public member. And a lot of people had heartburn with that. So it cast doubt on the validity of the vote. Now, I was elated with the outcome because it kept my service on the street the way I wanted it. The second thing is a question. If you are required to have a public member, what is the purpose of a public member? Is it to provide input from the public? And if that's it, why can't the public member serve in a non-voting advisory role?
But you need to break the vote.
I know, and that inevitably, the public member is going to be the tiebreaker. Right. So choose with care if you have to. Finally, on the business of ordinances, I can foresee a time when, in addition to giving the rate structure the force of law, that we may find people advocating mandatory recycling. Now, doesn't your body have something to say about that? Or do we let it go, as Chairman Hemmingson suggested, separately to the county and the city, and if they don't agree, what happens? Nothing gets done. Right. So this needs to be the clearinghouse, at least, for issues like that. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. I could pick the opposite side of that, though, that you're going to have one body force an ordinance on the other body. Mr. Dillard, yes.
Yeah, just real short. I just want to make sure I understood what went on compensation. I agree with what you come up with, but you kept it in bylaws. What we had problems with how we got here is because the full board and the full council didn't have control of what was going on. Now, if you leave it in bylaws and we do opt later on to go back to a 5-member board, they have the option to change the bylaws if you don't fix this right here. And I think that's one of the areas on compensation that the full boards need to have the input on that, not the appointed authorities. And so I just know what the history was of that, and I think we need to look at that. I like your idea on picking a member and in doing it and selecting. My only question there was, are you going to have a screening process? And if we went back to a 5-member board, are they going to do the screening and present the names? And I'm just throwing it out. I don't have an opinion. I just wonder how that process works. I like the idea of 1-year appointments because that's what you do with the elected officials. And as far as picking somebody from the task force, I think it's great because they're aware of it, but I kind of disagree with Kevin in that I think that is a potential for conflict of interest because the task force works real close with the board and with the authority, and I think you better get your direction from your legal counsel other than myself or Kevin. I don't think either one of us are good practice. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I have a comment, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. 2 things. We do have another public member on another board that is compensated, and so I'm just wondering about consistency here, and
Consistency with this board?
well, consistency with all of our boards. So we voted to remove the compensation for local transportation with the exception of the public member. So now we're saying we're not going to, if we go back to a 5-member board and we have a non-elected official, a public member appointed, then they won't be compensated either? Or what, how are we going to do this with all of our boards? My other issue is that, and I've said this before, is when I sit on a board, I'm representing that board. I'm not wearing my city hat. And I object to the fact that it's considered a split between the city and the county when we're talking about these issues, because we're all one community, and I think we need to look at being on a board as a unified body, regardless of a city or county hat.
I think that if we're going to talk about other boards, we should probably do it at a city-county meeting. And are you saying that El Tico doesn't pay their committee members at all except for the public member?
Public member's the only one that's compensated now.
Well, that's interesting.
But there's a whole bunch of boards out there that don't compensate anybody. Never have.
I had asked someone one time, where these all started from anyway. And it was to ensure that people would show up for meetings, they would have forums, is where the conversations had started. I don't know, I didn't look it up in history or whatever, but...
All 10 of you are here.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Yeah. But I think that's where it started.
I do want...
no extra money.
Yeah. On the compensation, though, I would agree with Mr. Dillard. I don't think this board should have the ability to grant compensation going forward in the future. That's where we ran into problems before. So if we need to...
You're taking it out, though.
Yeah, we're putting the compensation...
Yeah, maybe
But isn't it the city and county both that have to amend the JPA?
Yeah, so for compensation...
This is just to come up with words
This
that
is
you all
why-
agree on once, and then it has to go to each of you separate, and hopefully you'll agree on it twice.
Right.
So procedurally,
So there is no compensation, period.
Right.
that's okay. I'm just thinking procedurally, we also have to change bylaws to match what we're doing here tonight. Because, it still talks
Well,
about
if the city and the county
dollars per
adopt
meeting and-
whatever recommendations you make,
Mhm.
and since you are the city and the county, I'd say there's a good probability that if you all agree here, you're probably going to get close to agreeing there. Then, after the JPA gets amended, then the
we
bylaws.
dive into the bylaws to be able
Because
to
this
match.
board
Okay.
does the bylaws. And the
Okay.
bylaws are not complicated.
So does anybody else have anything to add? Because at this point, it's direction. Put that all together for us, Kevin, bring it
I'm
back
going to
up.
polish this up and bring it back next meeting for
Great.
your final review and referral for adoption. How's that?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay, 7.2.
Oh.
This was a
This is a rate resolution related to this change order. We recommend you approve it.
So move
Commission-
resolution 212-02.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Public comment. Seeing no public comment then, bring it back to board. Any discussion?
So this is the
This is a resolution that puts the...
raising the transfer station rates.
Right.
Transfer station and the collection rates.
And the rates at the Gasky and Klamath transfer stations.
Right, there's 3 different components.
And there's no public comment on that? That's
They've talked about it already.
interesting.
We went through it pretty,
They talked about it.
yeah, for a while, so.
Given the proposed budget that we talked about, does that assume that this new rate structure is going forward?
In my budget report, I suggested that if we get our 3% portion of this, that will help us be more likely to make our revenue. If it's not, then it will be harder.
Okay.
So, yeah, yes.
Okay, any other comments or questions from commissioners? Rose, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Westphal?
No.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner McNamer?
Yes.
Commissioner McClure?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes. Is that everybody?
That
Yes.
passed, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, Commissioner, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ania.
Mr. Chair, could we move, is it possible procedurally wise to move number 8 up before we go to closed session?
Yes, I'm going to, yep.
Okay.
We are going to adjourn as the Solid Waste Authority and reconvene as the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority. And we are going to have discussion, possible action on regarding the term of agreement with American Towing for movement of abandoned vehicles.
Yeah, thank you for your patience on this. We have Dave Mason here, is here, and Ed Borders with American Towing is here, and they may, if you have questions, they're available. And because this is brand new, this is the first time this board has sat as the Abandoned Vehicle Authority, I provided a good chunk of information, including the actual joint powers agreement that formed the Abandoned Vehicle Authority, so you have that for background. The first thing in the agenda is the contract with Northcrest Towing. Remember, Steve Clay was here last time saying you shouldn't let this contract go on so long. I included this so you could see what his contract looked like, and his contract went for 7 years before we gave him this notice on October 28th, 2009. The terms of the agreement, the current one is the same as the old one, which is if the board wants to make a change, provide notice by November 1st. We do a RFP, or a competitive process, to see if we can get a better price, and then everybody gets to compete again. So you have the authority and the power to make that decision. All I've provided for you is background, and I thought if Dave could be available in case you had questions about whether he's satisfied with the service we're getting from American Towing, and Ed came, and I think in case.
Kevin, I think, I was one of the ones that asked questions. I just, to be honest with you, don't know the procedure or the mechanics of how the contract were set up from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think a contract in perpetuity is a mistake. I think you have to have something that brings it up
I understand.
every 4 or 5, 6 years, whatever it is.
Sure.
But that needs to be laid out from the beginning instead of saying you have this thing in perpetuity. To me, that's because you're farming out private business. So if American Towing hangs on to it, that's great. But let's have some parameters on it too.
Right. I'm just showing you what we have.
That's why we
And I'll say again,
Wow.
you have complete authority to change this within the terms of the existing agreement, which is if you want to change it, I guess you could either renegotiate the current contract, I guess that's a possibility, or you could terminate the agreement November 1st, which is not what I'm recommending. But you have the authority to do whatever you feel is right and fair, and the new contract could have a specific term if that's what you prefer. It could be different. You can write it however you want.
I was kind of interested in maybe doing this on a rotational basis. I think that's what the county does. I don't know if the city does that. The highway patrol does. Yeah. Dave, I appreciate it. Maybe a little input on that.
If I may, there are service authorities that use the rotational list. That has been problematic and impossible in Del Norte County, just because, well, I'll give you for example, in the city of Santa Ana, tow companies on the rotational list pay the city $50 per car that they tow. And they tow the abandoned cars for free. That's part of their contract to be on the rotational list. In Del Norte County, tow businesses couldn't survive with those kind of rates.
So Dave, what?
Santa Ana is the towing capital of the world.
Oh, sorry.
They tow thousands and thousands of cars, and there's a line 2 cashiers deep all day long, people reclaiming their cars. We don't have the number of tows to support that type of arrangement. So Orange County has a problem. They don't know what to do with all their service authority money that they collect because they have 4 million cars and they have trouble spending it. We have 23,000 roughly registered vehicles, so we get $23,000 per year for towing the vehicles. That's almost enough to tow all of our vehicles.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask Mr. Mason, what, in a similar type community, what would be, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of rotational stuff, I just say it has to be put up to bid occasionally, and I don't know what would be a fair length of contract in a comparable community, or I don't really think rotation is something I have in mind. I mean, just put it up to bid, whoever's put the best bid out gets it.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't talking about having them do for nothing. Whatever rate is there now, use that rate, but put it on a rotational basis. Have people, either they want to be on the rotation or they don't want to be on the rotation to be called. I mean, we can still pay the same amount, but, you know, to have the contract go to one entity, whether that is Northcrest Towing or American Towing or whoever. But if they're on a if they answer the call, they're, to come out and get it, they're on. If they miss it, they miss their place in the rotation. And I don't have a problem with the contract either. I do have to agree with Supervisor Sullivan that it should not go in perpetuity. I mean, there needs to be some limit.
At the last go-round, last bid, Northcrest's bid was twice what American Towing was, roughly. Okay.
Well, and in that case, if that's what American Towing was doing it for, they probably wouldn't want to be on the list to be on rotation. So, I mean, I just think if you throw it out there, hey, you guys want to be on it or not be on it?
So, just for practicality's sake, the city and the county both use the Highway Patrol rotational list, and the Highway Patrol has their parameters to be on that list. We have tried in the past to get the tow companies to agree to the abandoned vehicles, and they weren't at all interested in doing that.
If it's not a feasible thing, I'm not trying to push it down anybody's throat.
So,
I don't have a problem with the contract.
Yeah. So the most effective way to get rid of the abandoned vehicles, the most cost-effective way to get rid of them, is with a contract tow service. And if you guys want to put a cap on it to come up for a rebid every so many years, whatever, that makes perfect sense to me. I will say that American Towing has provided excellent service, and I have absolutely no complaints with the service they're providing to the community.
And I don't think it's anybody's question their service capability or anything. I just think the question was brought up, and it really came down to what's the fair process to go on this, and should a contract be in perpetuity? I mean, if I look back at the previous contract, I look at it and say, wow, that was kind of a long time that we had this contract without going up to bid at all.
Yeah. And to be honest, there were some problems with the other towing company, Northcrest, which is why it went up for a rebid.
Go ahead.
What kind of term do you think?
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. What would be a fair duration? You're dealing with the tow companies in this situation. 5 years, 7 years? What's a fair duration?
I would think 5 years would be appropriate. I mean, to do it more often than that, really, there's no benefit.
Yeah.
Because the price of just the work and effort that goes into putting that together.
Not knowing the towing business, but knowing the cost of equipment, I would think that a tow company that was entering into a contract like this, especially with non-operable vehicles the majority of the time, that their investment in their equipment, they should probably, I would think it should be like a 10-year contract.
I'm fine with that.
Minimum, because otherwise nobody's going to bid.
Yeah.
Well, we got 3 bids last time. 3?
2.
Well, we got a third one.
Was there?
Yeah.
They were special.
And well, maybe he came late.
It's not a franchise.
And said, yeah, I would have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I don't understand your way of thinking, Ms. McClure.
Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah.
That if you're a tow truck person that's carrying, that you're getting like cars towed, my car won't start, will you take me to Pete's or whatever. Those are easy picks. But some of these abandoned vehicles are like in the brush, and you may have to have you may have to acquire extra equipment, would be my guess, because it's not a straight tow.
No.
No.
They're not.
And we could ask if that's.
Is there special equipment that has to be bought to handle this contract?
I think probably Ed Borders could give you better information.
I mean, because if there is, I'd be willing to
and
consider that.
and
If
the
not,
cost of-
10
and the
years
cost of
sounds like a
equipment.
long time.
And that, Ed, you want to?
Is there special equipment that is required by you that the other tow companies don't
Come
have?
up to the mic, Ed.
I purchased extra equipment just to do the recoveries.
Uh-huh.
Going to Klamath, we had a big recovery in Klamath. I think we did 36, 37 cars down there. A lot of the stuff we had to pull out of the brush. And and like she was explaining, out of the brush. I've had recoveries with motorhomes where you've had 200-300 feet of cable out, which you don't have on a tow truck. Your tow truck's required to have 75 feet of cable. That's it, not anything else. California Highway Patrol requires 75 feet. And a lot of companies, that's all they have. We have close to 800 feet of cable all spooled up, ready to do recoveries and pull stuff out of the brush. We've invested in a lot of extra blocks and tackle to get things out of the brush, get them around corners. We've invested in trailers and different size trucks. We used to transport motorhomes to Brookings, which was an added expense on Dave. Now we're working with the transfer station where we take motorhomes to the transfer station. They get stripped of all of the aluminum and wood particles and everything like that, so we can haul the chassis to the wrecking yard and dispose of them there, which in turn saves Dave quite a bit of money. So instead of doing one motorhome, we can probably do 3 motorhomes for the price of one, which puts back into his budget so he can haul more vehicles and more. We've also invested in tire machines and stuff like that, so we break the tires down so we can dispose of the tires in a different setting, because in one instance, if they go in on the vehicles, they're charged a bigger rate by the transfer station. If we can bust them down, throw the rims in the vehicles to dispose of steel, and then we take the tires to another facility to dispose at a third of the cost or half the cost. So we're again trying to go back and save the county money. We've invested money in, like I said, equipment, tire machines and cables and bigger trucks and bigger equipment, trailers, which is stuff that normal tow companies don't have. I have other people that are on staff that strictly go out and do the recoveries of the disabled vehicles. They're still certified tow people, but you can't have 7 people on your staff full-time all the time to do a tow for you to go to George's or you to go to Hambros or whatever. I've got these people that just work part-time for me. They have other full-time jobs. They come in when I've got big cleanup jobs to do and clean up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Appreciate the information. I'm reluctant to go more than 5 years personally. I think 10 years is too far out. But that's just me.
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner McClure. You have to recover the expenses of the investments that you make in order to do the job that the American Towing is doing, and I think that a 10-year contract is not unreasonable.
Well, why don't we cut it down the middle and make it 7?
I'll second that motion.
Oh.
This was,
Just a comment, but.
yeah, it was a comment. I don't think it was a motion.
Oh, I thought it was, Kelly. Didn't you make a motion?
Nice way to get your way, Mike. No, just kidding.
Was that a motion?
I'm just
In the interest of allowing other local businesses the opportunity to, whether, I mean, if American Towing keeps offering the lowest bid every 7 years, then he's going to keep that contract. But I think it's fair as a public entity to provide the option to go out to bid at least every 7 years.
So that is a motion.
That is my motion.
Is that your second still, Mike?
He seconded.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We currently have a contract, which.
And I think we can
Yeah, I
amend
think we
it
should-
to be extended for 7
The
years.
motion would be to direct staff to negotiate a termination date for the contract, essentially. Because currently it doesn't have a termination date, so with your 7-year direction, we could negotiate that, which,
Well, I think he's only had it for 2 years, so he would get an additional 5 years. And-
Correct.
That would bring it to J.
And then at the end of that 7 years, then it goes out to bid again.
Hey, Kelly, you might turn the volume up.
Sorry.
That would bring it to January
loud.
1st, 2017.
Okay. You want to make that motion to extend the contract?
Okay, my motion is to extend the current contract to go along with my motion of 7-year RFPs for the abandoned vehicle tow agreement to extend the current contract the additional 5 years. Does that make sense?
Completely.
Why are you looking at me that way then?
It's a little vague in the timing.
January of 2007.
Well, I've taken everybody's suggestions and tried to make them my own.
Right, so I'm interpreting your motion to mean 7-year contract.
Yeah. The motion is that the abandoned vehicle contract is to be a term of 7 years, where it will go out to a new RFP.
I understand.
I think this group is saying, directing staff to
Right.
And extend the contract.
negotiate to extend their contract for 5 additional years.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
We'll return for your approval of that amendment.
That's not been voted on yet.
I do have a question while we're still on the motion. If it's a non-ending contract at this time, do we have to have some kind of, do we have any liability on saying all of a sudden that we're going to end it in 7 years?
Well, that's what I'm saying right now. This wouldn't be unilateral. We
There
would,
must be a
we
term.
would have American Towing
negotiate.
would have to agree to it. And obviously, I believe it would be in their interest since you could terminate it this November, the next November, the next November.
Isn't there a termination clause in there already?
Yes.
There's a clause where you could terminate it with notice this November.
So we're giving notice that it's going to terminate in 5 years. You can't do that?
He said it works for him.
All you have to do
we will-
is you
I
agree to
think
the
they understand.
you agree to the 7 years, that's what we want to set. And then we direct staff and council to negotiate a terminating date with the current contract. And it would be to the advantage of the entrepreneur to go until the January 2017 date. So we don't have to have that. We just direct staff to negotiate it in contract.
Right. And then,
That's all you add at this point.
Yes.
right.
Okay.
What she just said after
Right.
I said it.
Somebody vote.
I'm just a little bit confused about the contract itself. Does that have to be, are we, is this authority the Del Norte County Abandoned Vehicle Abatement
Yes.
Service Authority? That's us?
Yep.
So that's terminology still correct within the contract?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, Mr. Hawley, the time is 6:15. In case you're wondering where we're at. In case you're wondering where it's at.
And I had to wait 45 minutes ago.
I see.
And we're your staff.
Thank you. I learned something.
We're in Crescent City.
You just need, excuse me, you just need direction to do this and bring it back?
Sure.
I should never point my fingers. I've been accused of pointing my finger at you before. Not accused of it, I've actually done it.
Yes, I've never accused you.
Okay,
of
would you bring us back rather than?
I would be most
direction
happy
staff?
to try to interpret that direction and come back.
Come back.
Are
Huh?
you withdrawing your motion?
Yeah.
No, just direction is staff.
All right.
just direct staff?
We didn't have to make a motion.
There's a motion on the floor.
Okay,
So we have a motion on the floor.
okay, and a second. Rose, would you pull the vote, please, and we can get
Commissioner
out.
Sullivan?
Yeah.
Commissioner McClure?
Direction to staff. We need to do that.
Seconded the motion.
I did, but I can rescind my second.
No.
Commissioner McNamara?
We're good.
Yes.
We're good. It's golden.
Commissioner Ania?
Yes.
Commissioner Schlong?
Yes.
Commissioner Murray?
Yes.
Commissioner Westfall? Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Chair Hemmingson?
Yes.
Thank you. Passed?
Yes.
McClure.
McClure? Chair
Yes.
McClure? Thank you.
Okay, and there's no more action for the Abandoned Vehicle Abatement Service Authority, so we will adjourn as that. We will reconvene as the Del Norte County Solid Waste Authority, and we are going into closed session. Is there any public comment on closed session items only?